No, that is the job, so that's why. I'm off tomorrow.
Hello.
What's up, sir?
Hey, how are you doing, man?
Good, and you?
Pretty good, thanks. Hey, sorry about that, bro. Let's see.
Mira, dejé mi libro en mi casa que es donde mi novia, though.
Oh, okay, okay.
Lo dejé, you know.
No, that's fine, bro. We are what we were doing risk, right?
Mhm.
So so we went over risk and if I'm not mistaken. We only did plan risk management, right?
Mhm.
So
That was the last one we did.
that's the last one we did. Yes. So the next one is identify them. So once um, we plan for risk, we have all of our planning with our strategy and how we're gonna do it. So pretty much decide the approach that we're gonna have regarding risk. Um, we define our risk tolerance and we define how risk management is going to be conducted. Uh, the next step is going to be to identify the risk that we have in our project. Okay, so basically, what we're going to do is to document. We're going to identify them. We're going to identify the risks that are going to be that could possibly affect the project, and we're going to have to document some of that information somewhere. So that way, if we have a document, what do we do this? Because if we document it, we know we're going to be able to prepare for it. So that way, we can keep track of them, and in order to be ready for those risks, we have to document them. So basically, that's the main goal. So we have several inputs. So identifying risk is not just a task that is going to be, or in this case, a process that is going to be performed only by the project manager. It is important that the project manager conveys the message to the team that everybody is involved with this process. Everybody can see. Everybody's going to have a different take and a different approach. The team members can have a different perspective regarding the project, and therefore they can see risks that might not be identified by the project manager. So everybody should be involved in the process. Um, as the main communicator, the project manager should make everybody aware of the need of being able to identify risks and um, the need of providing input regarding to identifying risks. So this process has several inputs. So one of them is the output of the previous process, which is the risk management plan. Then there are going to be some subsidiary plans like the management plan. Risks regarding budget are important. So some of that information might come from the project cost management plan, schedule management plan. Some of the risks, can affect the timeline of the project. So you remember that you're managing the triple constraint here. So you're managing the budget, you're managing the schedule. Those are very important risks. So that's why you need to have that information in there. Then the quality management plan. You need to know how the quality is going to be addressed and handled. Then human resource management plan, and this is strictly regarding the resources that are going to be working on your project, and that's a typical risk that you might be able to, that you most likely are going to see in each project. Resource availability is always listed in a risk on pretty much every single project. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So information that will allow you to identify any human resource or related risk is going to be contained in the human resource management plan. Then you have the scope baseline. So that's another part of the triple constraint. So some of the things that are going to be, what is the scope of the project, and there might be some risk associated with that. Then activity cost estimates. Again, some of the costs are related with activities that are going to be performed in the project. Then the duration that also has an impact on the timeline of the project, so that's important. The stakeholder register, the list of stakeholders of the project. You need to also have. There might be some information related to that. There might be some risks that could be identified regarding the stakeholders. Then the project documents, some information there might be pertinent to risks associated with the project. Then you have your two best friends, enterprise environmental factors, something outside of the project that, I don't know, if your project is building, that you're building a house in Florida, for example, then there's a risk associated with hurricanes, for example. So that's something that you need to keep in mind, or anything in the industry that is happening, or like I don't know, the something like what's going on in China right now with their economy that is not doing that great as it was before. So that could be an enterprise environmental factor that could affect your project if in any way, shape, or form what you do is related to China. And then the organizational process assets. There might be some compliance aspects that are reflected in policies or any documentation. So you need to keep that in mind as well. So there could be some information. So risk can come in different ways. And it can come from pretty much from many different angles. So that's why you have set so many inputs in regards to this particular process. And then that's those are the inputs that we have. And then we have the tools and techniques. What are we going to do? So the first one is documentation review. You have to review the project documentation to see look at the subsidiary plans, any assumptions, any other previous project files or agreements that you might have available. So those are in that review, you might be able to identify a few risks that are associated with the project but just by going that, and there might be something regarding the requirements, some of the assumptions that were made that might give you a hint in regards to some risk that could affect your project. Then you have to gather information from several sources. So especially from the team. So you have in your team, in your project team, you're going to have people from different backgrounds and different personalities. So one of the main goals is one of the main techniques is to use some brainstorming. Sit together with them and start getting a list of project risks provided by the different team members. And then you basically work as a facilitator. The project manager will be the facilitator and try to categorize the risks that are identified in the session, in the brainstorming session, and group them into categories. That could be a possibility, but The problem with this technique is that you're always going to have some people in your team that are more the dominant type, like the alpha type of personality. So for that, you have to complement the brainstorming technique with the second technique that is mentioned on page 324. And I know that you don't have your book, but there's another technique called Delphi technique. Delphi technique is basically um, a questionnaire that is provided to the different project team members, and it's a way to find consensus. So the beauty of the Delphi technique is that they don't do it in a group setting; they do it anonymously and on their own. And basically it's just a questionnaire with some ideas that they can provide, so people can do. They don't even have to give you their name. It's anonymous. So they only have to answer the questionnaire, and that way you can gather their responses and summarize them and reach consensus on. You'll have to do it usually a few rounds, more than one, to reach consensus, and that way you have a more unbiased response from the team. So you can compare that to your brainstorming, but at least in this way, you give the chance to people that are more introverted to be able to provide information that could be that might have been overlooked in the brainstorming session, because you're always going to have some type of, like I said before, some of the alpha type of personality that are going to be guiding and driving the discussion, and perhaps those risks that are identified might not even be the most important ones. Perhaps you might be overlooking several risks that could definitely derail your project. So that's the beauty of the Delphi technique. Remember, it's a questionnaire that is answered anonymously, and the goal of it is to reach consensus. So it's a complement of the brainstorming technique. And then you also have other information gathering techniques. Interviewing. You can conduct one-on-one interviews with your team members. That's also a good way to gather information from all the people, and then unbiased information. And then you could also apply what is called a root cause analysis. That's basically what you do with that is you identify a problem, then you discover the underlying causes, and then you can develop preventive action. So that's also another information gathering technique that you could use. So you have documentation reviews, you have information gathering techniques, and now you have another one that is checklist analysis. So with this one, it's just you're going to have some historical information, basically a risk identification checklist is based on that historical information and knowledge that has been accumulated. Probably some lessons learned from similar projects or even other sources of information. So you're just going to have a checklist that is simple and easy to follow. Ideally, it's not going to be. You have to make sure that the checklist is actually easy enough to follow, and it will help you to identify possible risks. So this is a way to make sure that those are, and with the checklist, you're going to have the things that need to be checked, or there could be possibly that you need to keep an eye on. For example, for similar projects, you might have a risk might be on the financial aspect, that basically the budget is tight. So getting an increase on the budget is not going to be possible because of a XYZ stakeholder, for example. So that's part of that might come from a lesson learned from a different project. So you might put watch budget or something like that. That could be an item on the checklist, and some other information that could come from lessons learned, like for example, not having the risk of not having proper, let's say that some of the legacy system that you have is not um, is not efficient, and and there's no it's not going to be upgraded in time for your implementation, for example. So stuff like that you can get. Um, that you can get the information from previous projects and lessons learned. Then you have it's called assumptions analysis. You might have some hypotheses, some scenarios that you want to, and what you want to do is to explore the validity of those assumptions and the way, and it will allow you to identify risk in the project from inaccuracy, instability, inconsistency, or even incompleteness of assumptions. Another really powerful tool that we have is some diagrams. It's most people are very visual, so these techniques really help you to visualize through some diagrams to visualize some and identify some of the risks that could affect your project. One of them is the cause and effect diagram, which has three different names, and I want to make sure that you remember this. And I don't know if you're able to take notes or not.
Yes, the fishbone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fishbone, Ishikawa, and cause and effect. So it's three different names for the same type of diagram. If you see Ishikawa, they're referring to the cause and effect diagram. Or
What's
if
the
you
purpose
see,
of having three different names?
ah,
What's the purpose of having three different names?
to confuse you.
Uh,
I don't see any other. I think Ishikawa was a Japanese author that did a variation of the cause and effect diagram. He was a researcher and kind of came up with a variation. And the fishbone diagram is just because it looks like if you look at one of them, it really looks like a fishbone. So just making an analogy with the graphic representation. It's one line in the middle, and then it has different lines that are going like, yeah, you're gonna be able to see it if you go to page. And there's an example on page. One that has it. Let's forget that page number, but they have it somewhere. They have all of them. Or not. I'll look it up, but I think there's a page somewhere in which they have the representation of all of it.
the three names?
All of the diagrams that we were talking about.
Yeah, there's one I'm so confused on. I think it's the S diagram.
But that's a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah, the one we. I don't think we haven't covered that one yet.
Because when I did a practice test for, I forgot what section. That was like two of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, those are cause and effect. Yeah, those are cause and effect. Ishikawa and Fishman are the same. System of process flow charts. It's another one, just following a process. A flow chart from beginning to end, and those are very straightforward. And then influence diagrams. 11-7. Let's see. Oh. Anyways, was somewhere. I mean, it's somewhere. Trying to find it. They have it somewhere. Wow. Can't seem to find it. Anyways. I was almost sure that they had it somewhere. Anyways, so those are the diagramming techniques. So then we have, and then another important technique is a SWOT analysis, which is basically strength,
weakness, opportunity,
weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you see, the SWOT analysis already incorporates
risk and issues.
Risk, not risk and issues. It incorporates positive risk and negative risk. Because how do we call positive risk?
Opportunities
and opportunities, yes. A negative risk?
Threats.
A threat. And then an issue is when a threat materializes.
Yes.
So make sure that you understand that an issue is a risk that materialized. Let's say that there's that you identify that there's a possible risk of I don't know of severe weather. Okay, so there's 80% chance of having severe weather in the area, and then actually. And you gotta be a little bit more specific. There's a 80% chance of rain in the afternoon tomorrow afternoon. So then, if there is an actual storm, really bad storm tomorrow, say tomorrow comes and there's an actual really bad storm, then that risk materialized. So it was a high probability. You're saying that it's 80%, so that'll be 0.8, and it materialized, and then it became from a risk, it became a threat. From a threat, it became an issue. So that's when, and why it's so important to understand that concept, because when you have an issue, that's when you have to come up with a response plan, whether it's mitigation or depending on the risk. We're going to see the different response plans that you can have. Mitigation is very common, but it's not the only one. We're going to see the different response plans that you have in place for risk. But it's important to understand the difference between a threat and an issue. So, and from this point on, make sure that when you talk to people, you also make sure that they understand what an issue is. An issue is when a risk materializes. Okay, whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't have to be negative. But if it materializes, then it becomes an issue. Okay. So,
what would be a positive issue?
In theory, that's the case, but the thing is that, but in reality, you have limited resources in your project, right? And that also means that you don't have 90%, or I'll say even more than that, 95% of the time, or even more than that, you're going to be focusing on the negative risk. You're going to be focusing on the threats. Why? Because you want to make sure that if there's anything that is going to, your main job as the project manager is make sure that your project is delivered on time, on budget, and with the level of quality that was approved that was agreed for the project. Okay, so basically you're covering on time, so you go, and you're going to deliver the scope that was approved on time and within budget. So that's your goal. So when it comes to risk, you're going, since you have limited resources, you're going to be focusing 95% within the 2 million things that you're going to be doing for the project. You're going to be focusing on the negative risks, the ones that can prevent you from achieving your goal, which is what I said, managing the triple constraint. So any if there's positive risk and it's identified, maybe you can document it, but you're not going to spend, you don't have the time to be um, focusing on the on the positive risk. Unfortunately, unfortunately that's the case. But it pays out. So, but if there's something that materializes, that could materialize, I mean, most likely you're not going to be. Bottom line is that most likely you're not going to be documenting any. Chances are that you're not going to be documenting any the positive risks, But it's important to understand that they exist, and then and they're there. But so hence the reason, for some of that positive risk materialize, and then it's most likely you're not going to even be taking that into account. I mean, so in some cases it has happened, like the Viagra. It was originally intended to be a blood pressure medicine, and someone noted the side effect. Maybe in that type of projects that involves research, and that is an important part of the project that you're doing that medical research. Maybe your chances are that someone can pinpoint something like that. But in regards to when it comes to most type of projects in different industries, you're going to be focusing almost exclusively on the negative risk. So that's why it's we don't dedicate that much time to those. So coming up with an example of a positive issue, that's I've never seen one, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
So then, expert judgment, basically that's a glorified name for common sense. You have people in your team that have different experiences and have been through the different situations and their area of expertise, in their area of expertise, and they can provide some risk based on their judgment. Okay. So after we applied all these different techniques, what do we get? What is the main output of this process? So basically, the risk register, that's going to be the output. And what is the risk register? It's just a glorified way of calling a list of risks. That's it. It's a simple document that has a list of risks that might be that were identified after you apply the different techniques, and it has the different information. So you might have the actual imagine a spreadsheet, So with a list of risks, and then you have the impact, the probability, and the event that could occur, leading to an effect. So it's usually in the regular or traditional risk register, you're going to have that the risk per se. What is a risk? What type of risk are you talking about? If it's a budget risk, if it's schedule risk, if it's stakeholder risk. I mean, you can have different classifications. And then what is the impact? And the impact, if it's a low, medium, or high. And then what is the probability of having it? And then you can have it again as low, medium, high. And you might have, in some cases, another column which will be the list of potential responses. Usually this is added a little bit later because you gotta do a little bit more, but you might have some options in regards to potential and make sure that you understand that I'm using the word potential. So maybe possibly you get some of the responses that you could apply to the risk. But regularly, I mean, most of the time you're gonna have that. The first column is gonna be the risk per se. The second column is gonna be the type of risk. So, like I said, if it's a budget risk, if it's a schedule risk, if it's a resource risk, if it's a financial risk, or well, that would be a budget too. So the type, then the probability, or the impact. So you have both impact and probability, high, medium, or low, medium, high, low, medium, high, and then you could possibly have the potential response. Okay, so but most of the time you're not going to have the potential response in the regular uh, risk register. So that's just an option. Um, some of them are very cumbersome. That might even be there might be some. I've seen in Excel that they have this formulas in there that they use some calculation. Once you enter some of the information, if it's high probability and high impact, then um, it, it it's going to add some color to it and make sure that so you can see it that it's a very important risk. So those are the ones that you need to focus your time and your response and your planning. Mm, but it's just that. It's just a glory. It's a spreadsheet with that risk information. And remember that that's a very dynamic document. Risk is always dynamic. Risk is something that changes over time and requires you to be on top of it. This is a very dynamic document that you have in the project. And by dynamic, I mean that it changes. It's not risk by nature is dynamic. It's not static, so it's always changing. It's a living document that you have. Okay. So then, and after we identify the after we have our risk register with a list of risks that could possibly affect our project, the next step is that we're going to have to do we're going to start measuring that risk. So we're going to start applying a qualitative. The first type of measurement that we're going to do is a qualitative risk analysis. We have to analyze it, and by analyze it, I mean measure it and somewhat somehow, so you can have an idea of it. So a qualitative risk analysis is just a process because it's the process of prioritizing risk for further analysis or action. So you can, and the way you do this is combining the probability of happening and their impact. So basically, you want to have the key benefit of this is that you're gonna, as the project manager, you're gonna be able to reduce the level of uncertainty, because right now the only thing that you have is just a list of risks, but maybe you might have 80 different risks in your project, and by just having the risk register. But remember again that your resources are limited, so you're not gonna. There's some other things that you need to do besides risk management. So and you only have so much budget. Your resources are limited and are scarce. So you have to focus on the high priority risks. Those are the ones that you need to dedicate your time and effort. So that's the beauty of the perform qualitative risk analysis. It's going to allow you to prioritize the high priority risks based on probability and impact. So what are the tools and techniques? And so basically the way this is done, the way they perform qualitative analysis, risk analysis is done, it's just you're going to assign the different risks a relative probability, or likelihood of occurrence, and then the impact if the project materializes. You know? So you're going to assign a probability and an impact. So if the risk occurs, you might take into consideration other things like the risk tolerance of the organization and regarding cost, schedule, scope, and quality. More importantly, that's a triple constraint, and so that way you can focus on the high priority or risk that could affect your project. You know? What are the things? Ooh, excuse me. One of the things that you need to be aware of is that it's important to reduce the bias. If so so the levels of probability and impact are going to actually help you to reduce the bias. So some risks that might seem at the beginning, wow, this is a high priority because it's it sounds like high priority. Then a good way to determine if it's and very quickly if it's a high probability and a high impact risk, then most chances are that it's high priority. But you might have some high probability and low impact risk, like the rain, for example. Yeah, it's high probability that tomorrow, I'm building a house, and tomorrow afternoon is high probability of rain, but is that really going to be a high impact on the house? I don't think so. I mean, it's high probability, low impact. So is that a high priority risk? Chances are that it's not. So stuff like that. But if it's something that, for example, you get some information like an enterprise environmental factor, get some information that you're building the house, and then you get some information that says that they're going to raise the price of concrete blocks by 25% in the next 2 months, and you're scheduled to finish the house in 6 months. So if that materializes, you already worked on a budget for your project, so you have that in place. You're already in execution. Let's say you're in execution mode. You're already building the house. So if you don't have all the concrete blocks that you need, and for some reason, for some unforeseen reason, that's where the risk analysis comes into place. Um, you you run out of blocks, and in 2 months you're going to have to pay 20% more for them because the price is going to increase, right? So that's a risk to your project. So it's touching that it could affect your budget. So those are the things that quickly, it could be a high impact. So but there's a way to ensure. So that will be a high impact because without concrete blocks, you're not going to be able to build a house. So, and if it's gonna the price is gonna go up, then it's gonna affect your budget. So that's a high impact, high probability in that case. So you have to be ready for that one, and come up with a response plan for it. So the other important aspect of the qualitative risk analysis is that it's very cost effective, uh, because you use a lot of expert judgment, and you can quickly pinpoint the high priority risks. So it's very you can do it very quickly, and it's very cost effective. So that's a very important aspect of um, qualitative risk analysis. Do you have any questions? Hello, Camilo? I see that you're on mute, but are you there? Camilo, Camilo. Camilo.
¿Pero?
Camilo, ¿qué fue? ¿Te dormiste?
No. What the heck?
Oh, you fell asleep, bro?
Sí.
Oh, it's all right, man. It's all right. So, no, we'll do it again tomorrow, bro. We'll do it again tomorrow.
5.
All right. It's already 10. So we'll do this one again tomorrow. We'll do qualitative risk, qualitative, quantitative, and can you do it tomorrow?
¿Qué hora? ¿La 8?
Or yeah, let me know, or 7. I don't know.
¿A qué hora estás llegando?
I can do 7.
7.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is that tour or 7:30?
Sí, sí.
All right, let's aim for 7:30. But,
Okay. ¿Cuántas más sections faltan?
We're almost there, bro. We're almost there. Once we finish risk, we have plan procurement and stakeholder management. But that can tomorrow we can finish all of the planning and then start with executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. There it's only 2 processes, so we're getting there. Mm-hmm. So try to do tomorrow. At least an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay. ¿Cómo va el trabajo nuevo?
Bien, me gusta. Oye, I was gonna ask you, man. Do you think you can make a payment, bro? That would be greatly appreciated.
I get paid next Friday. ¿Eso está bien?
Okay, that works.
Sí, next Friday. Next Friday.
Okay, yeah, that works, bro.
All right, man. So you like the new job?
That'll be really helpful. What's that?
You like the new job?
Yeah. So far, so good, man.
Diferente.
Oh yeah, very different.
Ah.
Yep. So far, so good.
Claro.
All right, brother. So get some rest, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Okay.
Bueno.
All right, brother.
Listo.
Take care, man. Thanks, bro.
No.
Good night. Bye.